On this episode of This Week in Space, it's 2025, and we're looking at the coming year in spaceflight. That means maybe 25 flights of Starship, trips to the moon, maybe even out to Venus. But tune in and see what's coming up.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is This Week in Space, episode number 142, recorded on January 3rd, 2025. 2025 in space. Hello and welcome to another episode of This Week in Space, the 2025 in Space edition. I'm Rod Pyle, editor-in-chief of Van Aster Magazine, as always, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, the behatted Tarek Malik, editor-in-chief of Space.com.
2025, it's here!
Woo! Bringing credit to his career achievements with that cool hat. So tell us what your cool hat is. It's not Mickey Mouse gone robotic.
No, it's a Northrop Grumman Cygnus spacecraft that we got from one of the Antares launches way back when, out of Wallops, when they were still launching Antares rockets out of Wallops there. So I may have taken it from my child.
You may have stolen it from your daughter. Come on, don't soft pedal it.
She was given it by the president of Northrop Grumman Space Systems back when I think it was still orbital. It was a long time ago that she got it. Wow. When we were eating rocket fuel ice cream at the local ice cream shop in Wallops. So
you know how to live, you know.
I tell you, they make it with cayenne pepper. If anyone ever goes to a Wallops launch, go to Chincoteague Island and go to the ice cream shop there. You'll get rocket fuel.
Or come to LA to get smog flavored ice cream.
It's the most festive hat that I have that doesn't say anything because I forgot to buy 2025 glasses or something for this episode, and I regret it now. I have regrets. So.
Well, you'll have to make up for it by just being extra engaged in the headlines. Now, before we start, even though he kind of already did, please don't forget to do us a solid. Make sure to like, subscribe, and do the other podcast things because we need your love. Also, it's time for the 2025 Twit Audience Survey. This is the annual survey that helps us understand our audience so we can improve your listening experience. It only takes a few minutes, so go to twit.tv/survey to take it. Don't wait, take it before it closes in mid-January, and thanks for helping us make Twit even better. But now, as our New Year's gift to you, a space joke from Tom Melton, who happens to be National Space Society member 2053109.
All right.
He actually sent me his membership number with the joke. Are you ready?
I'm ready, Tom. Lay it on me.
Why was the request for a donut shop on the International Space Station denied?
Why?
Because it would be full of holes.
I get it. I get what they did there.
Wow, that was the smallest laugh bump I've had in a while. Nicely done. All right. Well, before we sink too far, let's, hey, I missed, here we go. Now I've heard, that was a bad segue, that some folks want to drill holes in the nearest Soyuz capsule when they hear our jokes. But you can help. Finish your best, worst, or most indifferent space joke to us at twist@twit.tv. Okay. Wow. Just go ahead and step in it, Rod. Headline news.
It's brand new. Brand new.
Headline news.
Headline news.
Thank you, Bethany, or whatever your AI name was. So did you go through these? I don't know if you had a chance to.
I did. I went through the whole thing. You always doubt me. Doubt me, but I come in clutch. That's like my modus operandi.
Right. You like come sliding in at the last second.
I may have been adding things like in the last 5 minutes. I don't know. You don't know, Rod. You don't know. Right? So.
Clearly. I barely even know you. Who the heck are you? Hey, the Parker Solar Probe did its big thing, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. I tell you.
Yeah. So I want you to give us the whole story, but, just give us the whole story.
Yeah, well, this is from space.com, but also from NASA and the Johns Hopkins University. In fact, since you and I first mapped this out, there have been developments in the last day, too. But as we were all getting ready for Christmas on Earth here on Christmas Eve, NASA's Parker Solar Probe made the closest ever and fastest
and hottest.
And hottest, yeah, whipped by the sun. It flew within, about 3.8 million miles of the sun. We're 93 million miles from the sun, if memory serves. So, that's the closest that we've ever get. It's the closest that any human-made object has gotten to the sun, and it's the closest that Parker Solar Probe is going to get. It was its 22nd flyby, and it was kind of like one of those, what does JPL like to call them? Like the 7 minutes of terror type things, except this was like over a week and a half, because on December 20th, 4 days before this flyby, Parker Solar Probe went into like an automated mode. It sent a ping back to Mission Control, which is over at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory in Laurel, Maryland. And it says, all right, I'm starting my approach, my trench run if this was Star Wars. Oh, wow, that's really apt, right? Because it's a star, right? It's the sun. You see, are you picking up what I'm putting down there, Rod? Right. Anyway, so
I'm sorry, I was taking a little nap, but pray continue.
So it accelerated up to 430,000 miles an hour, which is absolutely crazy. And it did this not just in this flyby, but over the course of 7 different flybys of Venus, and then the other 21 like ever closer approaches that it made over the last years. I think it launched in 2018, so it's been quite some time to make this journey. And the really interesting thing is that, like you said, it got hot. 1,800 degrees is what they were expecting to see at this point as it flew through the sun's corona. It's the hottest bit of the sun. So it's flying through the atmosphere. They call it kissing the sun or touching the sun, essentially. And it has this really thick heat shield on the front that's super advanced in a way that all of the instruments, the 110-pound package behind that heat shield, is kept at room temperature. So it's as comfortable as, well, I don't know like how you run your house, Rod. So it's
cold.
About 60,
cold like my heart.
5 degrees. It's about 65 degrees here. I don't know if it was like that cool because we run a cold house, but it survived, and they didn't find out if it did. It was all automated. They had a lot of confidence because of how the spacecraft has performed to date, but they didn't hear anything until December 27th, when at midnight it sent like a beacon home, like boop, which means, hey, I'm still here. That's literally all they got. But they were like, hey,
tones.
This is great. Our spacecraft is beeping. And then just actually yesterday, they got all the telemetry down. So they got the download that says, this is how fast I'm at. This is where I'm where I am right now. I'm on track for 2 more flybys at the same distance and speed and whatnot. And now the long process of getting all of that data that it collected from the flyby is going to begin. They don't expect to start getting it until like the end of the month of January, as we're recording this, 2025. But a smashing success for something that we've never done before.
And at its top flyby speed of 430 miles per hour, if it took a straight line home, which it wouldn't, because it would take a long chunk of a spiral, but if it did, it would reach Earth in 9 days at that speed.
9 days? That's great.
How about that, huh? I even had my calculations checked by a real honest-to-God engineer. I'm still a little curious, and I meant to see if I could look it up, but I ran out of time. But being that it dipped into the corona, correct?
Yes.
Corona photosphere. Corona.
Well, yeah, the outer layer.
Yeah. I mean, that region, I'm trying to remember my solar regions, because the sun's really weird. It's got these areas that are hot and then cool and then really hot. And I thought the area it was going had hot ambience beyond just the solar radiation part, which means that the instrument package behind that shield would still be exposed to fairly high temperatures, but apparently not.
They were hoping that the speed that they went through would kind of counteract that, because you are right. The corona actually is really weird, and this is one of the mysteries they were hoping that this mission is going to uncover. It's hard for me to take myself seriously with the hat while we're talking about the news. I'm going to take it off.
And we're taking you seriously because Anthony just wrote, we're not going to get through all these stories today. I know. Reflecting of your long answers, but you know what?
Well, we've never done this before. Year. This was a historic thing. So
yes, and this
but
is
you're right. One of the mysteries is, why is the corona so hot? Why is it harder than the surface of the sun? So
we should let you have your answers. Okay, moving on. Hey, we got a new rocket coming up. New Glenn, after 24 years of all that stuff going into that factory, finally a big thing extruded out the back, and it's the New Glenn rocket, and it's on the pad. The recovery vessel was dispatched, I think, yesterday, right?
Yeah, Jacqueline, named after Jeff Bezos' mom.
Yeah.
It is on the way out to the Atlantic.
Okay, that's the tug, but the actual platform has a SpaceX worthy goofy name that I can't remember.
I thought it's called Jacqueline. It says Jacqueline right on the top of it. They wrote it on there.
You talk about the boat or the platform?
The platform.
Because I saw another name like, pray to Jesus, it'll come
So you
home
think
or
there's a
something on
chance?
it.
It's the name of the booster. It's the name of the rocket.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. Okay. Well, thank you for that correction.
Yeah. That's what I'm hearing at least. So
Okay. No, I think you're right.
we haven't heard much from Blue Origin. We were talking about this while you were, getting your dog and the answering the door earlier. Before we started recording the episode, I was talking to our fellow Discord folks about it. But yeah, so this is the big moment. Over the holiday break, Blue Origin got an FAA launch license for their first New Glenn rocket. They did a hotfire as well of all 7 first stage engines, and it went swimmingly, which is great. You want to see that happen. And I believe they did a hotfire of the second stage a few weeks prior. So it seems like all of their ducks are in a row. They said all they had to do now was encapsulate their Blue Ring adapter demonstration payload, because there isn't an actual payload. There is not Jeff Bezos' car on this flight. They want it to be taken seriously so they can get qualified for military launches later in the year. And so it seems like they're really set to go. The FAA license gives them several different windows that open on January 6th, the Monday, and so that'll go through through. I'm getting the hook here.
Yeah.
That'll go through January 12th, and we're waiting to find out what the actual date's going to be. So.
Anthony,
By this time next week, we should be talking about an actual launch run.
I hope so, because it's been an awful long time. And I know I whine about this continually, so I apologize. But when you see the progress that SpaceX has made in the time that it's been around, which is 2 years less than Blue Origin, it's been a real head scratcher to watch New Shepard launch and then launch some more, and they get grounded and then start launching again. But given the scale of what they've been working on, and given the fact that they're actually selling their rocket engines to United Launch Alliance in a form of co-opetition to let them launch first, it was just a real head scratcher as to what took so long. But there we go.
I think that they Blue Origin, just I don't mean to interrupt, but they have a very different ethos than SpaceX. SpaceX and is really pushed by Elon to test it first, and if it fails, all right, but let's learn from it and make sure it doesn't fail again. Blue Origin tends to do everything behind the scenes and then announce something once it's successful. In fact, when they did their first ever suborbital hop, it didn't even go into space. They announced it like a year afterward or something, like 3 months afterward, something crazy like that, because they wanted to wait till everything was done and they understood what had happened. Now, the delay, though, has been very lengthy. It's why you saw a leadership change at Blue Origin in recent years, and Jeff Bezos kind of leave Amazon's helm and then come in so that he can spend more attention on it to get to this point. So there has been a bit of whip cracking, I think, to get things on track so that they can get where they need to go, because this is the vehicle that'll launch the bulk of their Kuiper satellites for Amazon, and they want to have it up there to be a competitor for, I guess, Starship and the Falcons of the world.
And it's if I recall correctly, its lifting capacity is somewhere between Falcon Heavy and Starship, right?
It's between Falcon Heavy and Starship, just because Starship's the biggest rocket ever built. It does have a wider fairing size. I think it's like 7 meters instead of the normal 5.
Right.
And it has it's designed to be fully reusable as well, if memory serves. So eventually, and so as opposed to Falcon 9, which you throw away the upper stage, they eventually want to be able to bring that upper stage back, if memory serves. I could be wrong about that though, if they've changed their plans.
Well, in that case, why are we doing this podcast if you're not an expert? Expert.
I could be wrong. I remember them saying that, but yeah, we'll see.
Well, and to be fair to both of us as writers, they do change their tune from time to time, these new companies, and they don't always update us on the news. But it's nice to see not just this rocket, but news coming out of Blue Origin, because for a long time it's been getting news out of North Korea, and that's difficult too. All right, so Elon announces on Twitter/X that they're working on the last Crew Dragon, or Dragon capsule. It might not have been Crew Dragon. It might have been cargo at Hawthorne, California, before they move everything to Texas.
I didn't see this tweet. I did not. When did he tweet this out? So I must have missed it.
Check the date, but I saw it yesterday, so it was probably the day before. The story's been out for a while, which is why I put that note in there for you, which is that we knew they were moving to Hawthorne. I guess he just wanted to rub it in a little bit to us Californians who will be losing every trace of SpaceX.
I was really surprised to hear that, because when they said they were moving to Texas, I found it really hard to believe that they would, what's that word? Untrenchify? Decamp the whole manufacturing process. I don't know what you call it.
Because I thought,
decamp the full manufacturing apparatus out of Hawthorne.
Because Hawthorne's a big operation; it's huge.
And as far as I know, that was where they were building everything, and cranking everything out. Now if they moved the
Not
Raptor
Starship.
engine. If they move the Raptor engine out to Starbase, then that would explain a lot, because they're building, like, they want to build, I think, one of those an hour is what they said. I think back in November.
Yeah.
So it's something crazy like that.
Well, if he's going to relocate everything to Starbase, let's just tap him on the shoulder and remind him he can't keep using those big Kevlar tents, because they get hurricanes there.
Oh, they don't have those anymore, though. They built like all buildings, and there's like 4 VABs and all of that stuff there.
Yeah, but aren't the main fabrication plants still those big like, what's the name of the company?
They have like really low like
steel
manufacturing
sheds.
structures there now.
Yeah.
There were these big aviation tents when I was there, but that was 2019. Now they actually have a lot of physical structures there.
Because you get to go to those things. All right, last story, and this is a quickie. We saw Ingenuity, the Mars helicopter, fly once again at the Rose Parade this year.
Did you see this? Did you go to the Rose Parade in Los Angeles?
No, it takes me 10 minutes to get up there. Are you crazy? No,
Yeah,
I went a lot as a young person, and to do it over and over, especially if you spend the night out there, is enough. But this was the float for Flint Ridge La Cañada, if I'm correct.
Yeah. This is from Robert Perlman at collectspace.com. He's the one that found this story. But, we always look for, I missed this float. Fun fact, I have marched in the Rose Parade before.
Oh, please.
So
please.
when USC went to the Rose Bowl in 1996 on January 1st.
You had to wait till university. My high school band marched the Rose Parade, but go ahead. So anyway, so they have a float that has the Perseverance Mars rover on it, or a semblance of it, studded with flowers and seeds and all this.
And an astronaut riding it, like, wee!
And an astronaut looks like he's about ready to fall off. And a real drone flying from the front and then coming back, and flying from the front and coming back. Now, the interesting thing about the Rose Parade is you really want to be in the first half mile where it starts at the west end of town, because by the time you get to Midtown, half the floats are broken and being towed by tow trucks, and all the little armatures are just stuck in one position because they don't work anymore. But, when you're building something out of wireframe and chicken wire and covering it with seeds and flowers and all that stuff they do, I mean, it's an amazing effort and feat. Yeah. And every time I go to a regular parade, it's like, oh, these floats are just like painted. They don't have flowers on them. So I find that disturbing. Anyway, so that was cool. And they are, I believe, up through the end of today. These floats are still viewable at the east end of Pasadena if you go over and pay some probably quite a massive fee to go see them. You can walk around and stare at them inert. Yeah,
there were 2 space floats this year, which is really cool. There was this one, and there was another one with a little astronaut guy on it, a little rocket guy. It was really fun. So,
all right, well, let's go to a quick ad break to give our listeners some relief, and we'll be right back. So don't go anywhere. All right, it's 2025 in space, and we have our resident space expert, Tarek Malik, here. Without his hat.
I took the hat off. Yes,
you did, but you still look devilishly handsome.
My mom says so.
God bless moms, because they like us no matter what dumb thing we do, right? So let's start with Starship, since that's a big story. We'll be talking about this in more depth next week, I think. But
very appropriate. I got Starship news that just happened before we set to record today too.
Well, go for it, mister.
Well, yeah. So actually, we just ran a story at Space, and you might have seen other folks talking about it too, about 2025 being the year of Starship. I think that what you flagged here is that SpaceX currently has an FAA launch license to fly maybe 25 Starship launches.
Excuse me, has the license been granted, or is it out for public comment? Because I don't think it's actually been formally.
I think that I thought that it was fine. Like I think that they had like a license to fly the same type of mission, like basically as long as they don't make any changes. And so, like the Flight 6 and Flight 5 test flights that we saw in October and November were very, very similar in what their profile is, which means, they're going to try to do for catch, but they may land offshore. They're going to, splash the Starship down in the Indian Ocean. And because they're the same, they can use the same license that's good for 5 years, as long as they can get the, the sign-offs for scheduling. So,
excuse me, but at least one outlet reported that they were angling to also get a license to land the ship upper stage.
Yes, and we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, okay, because if you're catching the big one of the Mechazilla...
They're going to catch the upper stage.
With what? The second pad?
With the second pad or with the original pad after leaving the upper stage up there. So here's the big news, right? So the big thing for Starship is SpaceX wants to launch a lot of them. They launched like 3 last year. They launched 1 the year before. They want to launch up to 25 this year if they can, like as you say, get through all of those FAA hurdles. Trump's going to be president. Elon Musk is going to be this whatever efficiency driver. So I think they're going to get whatever they're going to need to get for that. So the big issue is that, of course, they have to start flying. And the next flight is Flight 7 of Starship. And just before you and I sat down, in fact, I was having lunch today as we were getting ready for it, SpaceX basically dropped the entire profile and plan for Flight 7. That means that they're probably like a few days away to a week away from planning the flight itself. And I've heard some days like January 10th or 11th thrown about, which would be next Friday / Saturday as we're recording this. And this is going to be a brand new ship. So you're saying that you're hearing about them wanting to land the ship at Starship at the Starbase facility. Well, they're flying prototype, they're strut things like that they would catch. The catch little
points.
things, catch points on the spacecraft. They're not flight worthy. Like they're not designed to actually catch the vehicle. They're going to see what the heating environment is on reentry to see how strong they have to make them. So we know that they're going to want to catch this thing, which is interesting because you'd think because they're experts at vertical landing, they'd want to land it, but no, they're going to do that. They've moved the flaps up on. They've made all these upgrades, a brand new avionics and flight computer to try to enhance how long the ship itself can stay up. It's got a new heat shield with a backup layer beneath that heat shield, a lot of things. And this is what I think is the most exciting. They're going to deploy a set of what is that called? It's like a simulated Starlink satellites. They're going to deploy satellites, which means they're going to start spitting them out with that Pez dispenser thing that they've got.
So Flight 7 is going to carry a load of Starlinks?
It's going to carry a load of a simulated Starlinks. So because they're not going to keep them in space, they're going to spit them out with this Pez dispenser thing that they've got, and then they're going to fly a similar trajectory behind the main ship, which means that the ship's going to try to land in the ocean and soft land, whereas these things will burn up on the way back down, kind of on the way down behind it. So they're calling this like a new version, like the current Crew Dragon is Dragon V2 was initially called. This is like Starship V2 or a new variant of it that they're hoping is going to be either a major step forward, if not like the big definitive vehicle for the next few test flights.
Okay. Hey, Anthony, look, it's not even the half hour yet, and we're through 2 of our 25 stories.
There we go.
Look at us. All right, let's skip over New Glenn because I already talked about that.
Yeah.
And this isn't really a 2025 story, but it will take place during 25, 26, 27, which is China has announced not that they're working on spacecraft for their crewed lunar mission, but that they're ready.
Really? Wow.
Which should be sending shockwaves through the halls of the government and the Hill.
They did show off like a lot of hardware at the end of 2024.
Well, the guy in charge said this stuff's ready, which may have been, that may be a bit of a rounding up of a statement, but so just to backtrack for a second, we just finished an op-ed for my magazine, which will soon be in your online magazine. Myself and one of my key writers named John Cross about why getting back to the moon first matters. And that's a debate. You could say that it matters. You could say that it doesn't. This op-ed kind of straddles the line of it matters scientifically, and it matters for geopolitics, but it also matters for how we look at ourselves. Because I'm old enough to remember the space race the first time around. Not old enough to remember Sputnik, but certainly old enough to remember the fact that the United States got poked in the backside and decided, hey, we want to get to the moon because the Russians have beat us at everything else. That was back in the 1960s. Now, many people perceive the same kind of race, quote unquote, going on with China. It's a very different thing, but depending on how you look at it, the geopolitics are not dissimilar. And I think part of what John was really going for in this op-ed was just how we look at ourselves. We like to be first in everything. We really aren't anymore, depending on what part of our global endeavor you're looking at. But that's okay. There's room to share. But the moon's kind of a big deal, and there are concerns about what might happen if a less Western-aligned nation got there first and said, okay, this is an exclusion zone. You go land at the equator. And that's really the big thing people are worried about. So
yeah, I think what you're dancing around is the big question is, does the treaty for outer space hold up if someone is actually living on that other planet? We've never tested that, so that's what we're wondering how that's going to play out.
Living, or even if there's just a robotic base setup that's in operation that's extracting resources. Can somebody then use that as logic to try and twist an argument of, well, I know what the Outer Space Treaty says, but we all know that the Outer Space Treaty, which was signed in 1967 by the then flying spacefaring nations, is kind of thin. It's not as specific as we'd like. The U.S. has tried to sort of augment that argument politically by saying, well, it is okay to take resources out of the moon, but not everybody's agreed to that. So we've got, us with the Artemis Accords trying to leverage what we want, and we've got China and Russia with the International Lunar Research Station trying to leverage their goals, saying, no, we want to do science. It's those capitalists over on the other side.
Since we're talking about the moon, because you mentioned that China said that their spacecraft are ready, but a landing by 2028, 2029 is what I think is you were alluding to there.
Yeah.
Still is pretty far beyond 2025. What we wanted to see in 2025 is Artemis 2 send astronauts back around the moon in September, and we know that that's not happening. I think that's the one big disappointment.
I thought I remember somebody telling me that we are going to land on 2024.
Well, technically, weren't we supposed to land in 2020? That was like the whole big thing. Don't get me started. We've had that discussion like so many times, Rod.
Yeah.
So annoyed. So
okay, well, let's leave this one behind because that's really not a 2025 story. I just wanted to sort of squat on that for a minute. But in 2025, we are going to have a new NASA administrator that at least putatively is Jared Isaacman. So far, that's been Trump's recommendation. So unless he changes his mind. And we have, in the video, we have a cool picture of Jared looking longingly at the stars in his cool SpaceX helmet. And it's impossible not to like this guy.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. I met him.
He's good looking. He's very nice. We both met him. I think I met him more than you, but that's okay. And he's
I met him like once. So
he's incredibly charitable. He's kind. He's great with kids, for God's sakes. I mean, it's like, as I've said before, a space Jesus. So if he's in charge, how is this different than what we've seen with Bill Nelson and people like Bridenstine? Because this is a huge step outside the traditional circle of NASA.
It is. We've seen this type of a departure before, right? When you got into faster, better, cheaper for NASA back in the 90s, right?
Oh, Dan Golden.
Yeah, that was a change at that point in time.
It was a change that left a lot of people kind of unhappy.
Yeah, and I would say after Dan, Sean
O'Keefe?
Sean O'Keefe also was a bit of a departure, to me at least, from what I would think. And then of course they swung around to Charlie Bolden and not Charlie, but Mike Griffin, who really I think got the shuttle program on track for its ending. And I think that had Mike Griffin been given the paycheck that he said that they needed from Congress, then he would have gotten us up to the moon by 2020 like Constellation would have done. But anyway, I think it's really too early to tell. I think that the intention, like the good intentions, are there. I think that the passion is clearly there. This is a man who left high school to found a payment system that has made him I guess I would assume a multi-billionaire if you can afford more than one private mission.
Multi-classification.
I think about Jared Isaacman every day when I check out at the counter because I see that Shift 4 machine that I wave my credit card on, and I'm like, well, that's thank you, Jared. So, but I think we'll have to wait and see. Now, of course. Later this month is the inauguration. That's when Trump will become the 47th president. After that, all of the nominations are going to flow out, and then they all have to be approved by Congress. I would expect that. I mean, on paper, there really isn't too much controversial about Isaacman, except that he's a businessman. He's flown to space. He has a good grasp. He's overseen a very complex aviation as well as business aspects. So we'll have to see how that plays on Capitol Hill. So I would be optimistic if optimistically speaking, I would expect there to be a NASA administrator in place by June, most likely before. But June seems pretty safe to not bet the chair on, I guess, if we'll do that. Right.
Well, and if they can, I mean, this is the earliest suggested nominee we've ever seen, at least in modern times. All right, let's do the exciting thing. We're going to roll to a commercial for one of our beloved sponsors, and we'll be right back. So stay in your seats. So here's kind of a twofer that I'd like you to comment on. We've got Trump coming in with Elon Musk hard in his ear, saying, hey, do this, do that. Here's the best way to go about things. And there are some that have expressed concern about the specter of the monopoly of SpaceX, which, to be fair, it's kind of hard at this point anyway for it not to become a monopoly because they're doing most of the work. They're getting most of the payloads. They're moving faster, better, and cheaper than anybody else to invoke the Dan Golden spirit. And, they've taken over half the global launch market, at least a little bit more, I think. So, they kind of almost can't help sliding into the status of a semi-monopoly. Yeah. But then we have Blue Origin coming up with the New Glenn, which NASA and others have confirmed that they're going to use, and also possibly launching their first lunar lander Pathfinder this year, we hope, the Blue Moon Mark 1. Mm-hmm. So how do you see that playing out?
Well, I think that it could really kickstart like a much wider market. It does depend on if these vehicles are successful and if they can fly them at the rate that SpaceX flies. I mean, as we're speaking, SpaceX is counting down to launch their first mission of 2025, the Thuraya 4 communication satellite for Space 42 out in the UAE. This is a rocket that they're using that has making its 20th flight, and this is a company that just finished 134 Falcon flights in 2024, right? And so they're
looking
hoping
at Starship. So you're talking about Falcon 9, right?
Falcon 9, yeah. And they also launched a Falcon Heavy or two over the year. So I mean, they launched quite a bit last month, and they were not only like the smashing their own records, they were the leader in the U.S., they were the leader in the world, and in fact, because of their Starlink flights, they raised the global record to its highest ever, according to a Space News analysis that came out this week. So I think it's really hard to make your mark when they've got that rundown. Now, they will finish at least a nominal Starlink constellation at some point in time, and they will have to ease back on that launch rate and just go to replacements and whatnot. So that a lot of that launch rate is SpaceX losing money because they're launching their own stuff into space and paying for it themselves. So we have to put that into perspective. There's a lot of other missions out there. I think that New Glenn has at least 8 that they're already trying to get qualified for national security payloads. That's a fast track type of a thing that usually takes a lot of time. They're thinking ahead on that. So I think they're going to chip away at it, and they're not alone. Rocket Lab, and I've got it on the list for later on, but we can talk about it now. Rocket Lab is going to launch their own kind of answer to the Falcon 9, and that's their Neutron rocket. That's a crazy rocket that has put the second stage inside the first stage, and it's going to spit it out like a hippo mouth when it gets up to altitude. And I'm really excited about that one because it has a hippo mouth. I think I love hippos, and I think that's amazing. So.
You're a strange
I don't
animal.
think that SpaceX has a monopoly. It's just like they're the ones that have all the stuff to launch as much. If you take away all of the Starlink missions, and there are many, dozens upon dozens, you are left with maybe 40 or 50 customer flights. Again, they win it because they have the success and they can sell less, but they're not undercutting prices yet because they have to recoup everything that they put into the Falcon 9 to make it reusable. And I think they're still doing that if memory serves. So Elon Musk has said, I think in recent years, that they're not going to do it for at least 5 years or so on Twitter until they can get that sorted. So this gives them some breathing room because eventually they'll stop launching as much because of the Starlink stuff. And then the customers like OneWeb, like Kuiper, which is going to be flying
which is Amazon's own constellation of broadband.
Exactly. So
is OneWeb still a business?
I thought so. They just actually recovered one of their satellites. They lost communications with it for 2 days. So, which you don't really want in a mega constellation generation. So, but they were able to get it back.
All right. There's a lot of juicy stories here, but we just got to talk about this one.
We got to shotgun through them. The Mars sample return is next. Let's talk about that.
Of all people, we have to shotgun through them. Let me give you an answer that's a sentence 10 minutes long.
I'll do my best.
Mars sample return. So just a bit of backstory, as regular listeners will know, Mars sample return has been going on for years trying to develop this thing. It got hung up. I mean, actually, it's been under development since the 70s in one way or another, both here and in the Soviet Union, but started seriously about a decade ago. Okay, we're going to go. We're going to take samples with Perseverance rover. We're going to drop them in certain places and keep some on the rover, and then we'll go collect them and bring them home. Record scratch. They sent in a memo to NASA upon NASA's headquarters request saying, how much is it going to cost? They said, well, between 6.5 and 11 billion, which the NASA administrator decided to announce at a press conference. Well, I'm looking at that as 11 billion, and that's too much. So, hey, private industry, step up and save this mission. So far, to my knowledge, that hasn't happened. Then the Chinese say, hey, we've been doing really well on the moon, and we've done pretty well on Mars, and we think we're going to be able to do a sample return by 2027. So we got to make a decision this year whether we're going to continue with Mars sample return as the possible runner-up in 2030X, somewhere in there, or if we just, hand it away.
That decision is going to come sooner than you would think. Basically, Bill Nelson, just at the close of 2024, said that they are looking to refine their plan for Mars sample return before the next administration takes charge. That means sometime this month, in the next couple of weeks, before January 20th or whatever, when the inauguration is, NASA should be releasing some sort of new updated plan. Now, China's plan, 2027, not inconceivable when you see how they did sample return for the moon. They launched an orbiter, a return vehicle, and a lander that had its own return vehicle that they landed. They scooped some dirt. They put it in the sample container. It launched off. Very, very tight, very quick, very succinct. The current Mars sample return plan, as it is at NASA, is, hey, we sent a big rover there. It collected a dozen samples. It dropped a bunch of them in a big pile, and it also has other ones on it. Right. So then we can go and scoop those ones up. Maybe we'll use a helicopter. No, we're not going to use a helicopter now. We'll send 2 rovers. No, we'll just send 1 rover. It's very complicated. You could just say, we're going to land and scoop some dirt and then come back, and I think that's the decision that they're looking to make, because that stuff is still there. They could always go back and go get it. Eventually, I don't know, but that's what we expect to get a refined update within the next few weeks, perhaps even in the next week.
To kind of just zoom in on a couple of things you said. So China basically grabs a contingency, the equivalent of an Apollo contingency sample. It comes back. Contingency sample is when Neil Armstrong got down the ladder and was looking around going, wow, this is cool here. And NASA's going, Neil, get the contingency sample. Come on. which is basically, look, just grab something in case you have to come home right away. At least you make it worthwhile. We got some dirt.
Put it in the baggie, put it in your pocket.
And 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 I'm simplifying it. I mean, China's sample was better than that. But again, NASA makes these big, complicated, multi-stage plans, which, I mean, they're good for science. But to have this rover driving around for 5 years now, and when it was launched, we didn't even have approval for a budget for Mars sample return. It was still kind of in head-scratching state, at least in the halls of government. And last time I saw it, JPL, what was that, 2017 maybe? I was doing a write-up on the lab that was working on the 6 degrees of freedom arm that they would have to have for the Fetch rover before they were going to use a helicopter, which would land on the Mars sample return craft, drive over to Perseverance, have this very involved multi-axis arm that would be able to extract the samples, because that's very hard to do, and also be able to drive, if necessary, over to wherever the samples that had been dropped, pick them up, which means being able to reach under rock overhangs and around boulders and that kind of thing. So I don't want to say it wasn't well thought out, because there are a lot of very smart people working on it.
Yeah.
But it was so
and they know
complicated.
those samples, they know those dozen, whatever, they know exactly what's in them. They know where they got it from, and they're very varied. They got maybe more than they would have just landed in one spot. What they should do is just build a reverse sky crane and then go catch it. Just bring the whole rover back, with the samples aboard and everything. That'd be great.
I think there's between 30 to 40 of them. But that includes, what do they call the ones? They have like ground truth samples that they bring from Earth. There's a phrase for those. I can't remember, but basically it's like, okay, here's Earth air. Let's make sure that it's compared to this and so forth. So anyway, so that's frustrating, and we're probably going to lose that one, but that's okay. It's good for science no matter who brings it back. And of course, there is the conversation on the side from Mr. Musk about, well, why would you do all that when I can send an entire spacecraft the size of a big rig to Mars and you could lower a robot out of that and it can, because he's building robots too, right? So he could lower a robot out of that cargo hold by rope if he had to, have it stomp around and pick up some samples and stick it in its mouth and bring them back. So
I think make that a contest, make that a commercial challenge. Who gets there first to get those samples back? You'll get something. You'll get some ideas, right? You'll get something.
Yeah, and disturbingly, and I just want to extend the story very quickly. So we've seen what probably is the demise of Mars sample return in this decade, along with the really aggravating demise of the Viper lunar rover, which is supposed to land in the South Pole this year and go collect samples of resources, or at least try and prospect resources, see if they're there for volatiles like water and so forth. And, the head scratcher, as we've talked about, is it was built, it was finished, it was tested, everything seems to be going right, and then it gets canceled because it's going to do a budget overrun. Well, hello, how many NASA big programs have had budget overruns? We have new rules that it can only be, 33% or something. But come on, guys, you built a thing, so then you do another late Friday afternoon press conference saying, yeah, it's working really well, but we're going to cancel it and take it apart and give the pieces to all comers who want to send them on commercial flights. What?
Yeah,
very irritating.
So far, not a lot of takers on that either. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. So.
Well, and I wrote somebody who's kind of an insider about this, and he was saying, it just didn't have a lot of, which I found interesting, that he said anyway, it didn't have a lot of support within NASA because it didn't really align well with the Artemis goals, which I don't completely understand. But, whatever.
Yeah. Speaking of moon missions, we should talk about that for 2025. Or are we going to go to a break? What do we want to do?
Anthony, are we due for a break? Oh. I like that. He knows where to point. This is like Carol Merrill in an old game show. Go forth, young Tarek. Tell us your tale.
So you were just talking about Viper, and that was like a mission that I think we all had a lot of hopes for 2025 on. Actually, for 2024, it was slated to fly by the end of 2024 before it kept getting delayed and pushed back. Yada yada yada. And
by the delivery company, not by the rover itself.
Exactly.
Right.
By Astrobotic, the builders of the Griffin lander that were supposed to do it. In fact, I don't think that they're done yet with that. So we're still waiting to figure out what's going on there. Yeah. But 2025 is going to be a year of the moon of sorts, much like what we saw around this early part of the year in 2024. We're seeing another flurry of commercial and international missions to the moon. In fact, this month, Firefly is supposed to launch their Blue Ghost mission. I think it's launching on a SpaceX rocket, if memory serves, but they're going to launch their Blue Ghost lander to fly different COTS things and whatnot there. And plus Intuitive Machines is launching their IM-2 mission near the South Pole too. And I think they might be launching on both on Falcon rockets.
I think Firefly and JAXA's Hakuto R-2
are on the same one, right?
Are both flying on the same Falcon 9. I think Intuitive Machines is on a different flight.
Yeah, and so you've got at least 3 like quick missions already, and then there's another mission. I think in the background there is a Japan's M2 mission to the moon, which is going to fly on an Epsilon. Is that right, or is it a H3? I'm not certain which one that one's flying on. But
listen to us, the experts.
Yeah,
we should just have the listeners come on and say, "Well, I think it's going to fly on this."
The fact that I'm unclear is because there's so many moon missions, right? And so that's the exciting part, is that while we don't have a Viper, which I really think, like you were saying, it's a tragedy that we're going to take this thing that's been built and it's ready to go and just say, you know what? Scrap it, because
we changed our mind.
Yeah, exactly. But there are these other ones that are waiting in the wings. Will they be 100% successful? Experience says no, right? We saw that last year with Astrobotic, with a few others. But it does seem like the momentum is definitely there. And I think that if you've got 4 at least going in 1 year, one of them is going to succeed, at least. And that's what we saw. We saw JAXA's kind of auger in type approach with their moonlander really succeed and deliver some striking pictures of what a nose plant on the moon looks like with their lander. But it was still able to do stuff, so that's pretty cool.
Well, and the first Intuitive Machines mission, of course, toppled over because one of the landing legs collapsed. This Intuitive Machines flight, by the way, and then we'll go to our break, will be landing near the South Pole and has a mass spectrometer, which is a very valuable thing when you're looking for things like resources or organics, and a 1 meter drill package, which is pretty cool. So this is it's a pretty small and light machine. And as far as I could tell, it's static. So it's not going to be driving around and drilling.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we assure that it's inside a permanently shadowed region, which is where you want to look for these things, but they must have, sufficient navigation capability to make adjustments at the last minute. And I do see in the notes here, I wrote down, it is carrying some hoppers. So while they aren't going to be able to, I don't think, get samples, at least they should be able to characterize regolith nearby the landing site. Okay, let's go to another break because we love these. And we'll be right back to blast through our last handful of stories. Stand by. So I'm going to skip a couple because I want to make sure we include this story about VAST. So VAST, we've had people from VAST on the show before. VAST
Max Hout, the CEO.
Yes, thank you. VAST is a company, another comer in the space station area to replace and or augment, in this case, replace the ISS when it's decommissioned around 2030. But what's interesting about VAST is they're pouring, can I say it? Vast amounts of capital into building their Haven 1 space station without one of the NASA contracts that companies like Blue Origin and Voyager have received. So they're getting money, those two, to design and test space station replacement modules. VAST is doing it on their own, and they're actually apparently going to be the first to launch this year with their first.
That's really exciting. That's really exciting.
It's kind of amazing, actually.
Full disclaimer, as we have talked about on the show, my sister works at Vast, so I don't get insider knowledge from her. I made sure that she's really careful.
Why not?
About that? I know, right?
Right.
So, but this is really exciting. The Haven one, it's basically they've been building their own module, basically like a free flying module for a station, but they could also, if they wanted to attach it to something else, that's something that is potential. We heard Max talk about that, but it is fully modular too, that they could put it together with other things, and they did contract with SpaceX to launch that, which is why you see in a lot of their animations a Dragon vehicle visiting it, because they've got that relationship in place already. And I think that this would be like a big game changer. The big open question right now is what is next for space stations. NASA and Russia have both committed to an end of life of around 2030, but that could change. For the International Space Station, they're going to burn it up in a fiery blaze of glory over the Pacific Ocean. What is that? Point Nemo? Isn't that what they call it?
Yeah, it's that piece of nowhere in between land masses in the vast Pacific.
Exactly.
Where we think it's safe to crash these things. However, you and I are going to get on my boat and drive out there so we can watch it.
Let's go.
So this will be that experience where you see the white dot in the sky that gets bigger and bigger but doesn't move to the side. And then you realize at the last minute, oh, that means it's coming right at me. Yeah. So we'll be there.
Fun fact, when Mir, the Russian space station, fell out of space in, what was that, in 99, in 2000? It was right when SpaceX or Space.com was like a little baby, and I have been told that they chartered a plane to chase Mir's reentry, and they missed it. They didn't see anything, and that was sad. That was sad. But let's hope that you and I can get on a jet or a boat and watch this thing come back. And anyway, I'm getting sidetracked.
Wow, you're going to include me in one of your junkets. How nice! That's
but
a
Haven.
first.
The big thing about Haven though is that if they're able to get this up this year, if they're able to even get a crew to it in the next year, right? Then that is a viable replacement or a destination, an overlapping destination that NASA could have access to. They can't have access to the Chinese space station right now. They don't have those partnerships in place. That's the only other destination currently. Russia has said they're going to build their own thing, or maybe they'll take the existing parts of the space station, split them off. I don't know how that would work.
Well,
they don't have the power system for it.
Excuse me, but that would be interesting. So they have the power and propulsion unit and the life support unit, right?
Yeah, Zarya and
one of
Zvezda.
them.
Those are the primary modules.
Right.
But they also have a bunch of docking compartments.
But let's bear in mind the one that's having the cracking problems right now, which if they're going to reuse it, they got to undock it and probably weld up those cracks, was built in 1985.
Yeah,
it's much older. It's bad enough the space station's 25 years old now, closer to 30 if you count when pieces were built. But the Russian stuff is really old and creaky, and it was built for Mir 2. So the idea of reusing that, even if you're a Russian who has a much, let's say, a wider tolerance for hardware, legacy hardware, I'm being kind, that's crazy. It's time to retire
I
those
suspect
things.
that they would build something new with some sort of...
Well, they supposedly were, but last I read, their space budget was down to about 19 cents.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or
I don't know. We'll have to
rubles
see.
or something.
But that's why I think this mission is really important. To be able to have that crossover station, that crossover destination is really important to continuing the momentum of your spaceflight program. So, and it might put them in real hot demand, right? To have the only new game in town that they might be able to tailor to customers for, we'll launch this rack up for 3 months for you or whatever, because they can deliver it with SpaceX. I don't know. Be very interesting.
Okay, so going completely off the ranch here, will it be armed? Because the Russians did that once, which I thought was remarkable. I only read about this, I don't know, probably 10 years ago.
Yeah.
The Almaz / Salyut, which is one of their earliest space stations, one of them was launched with a Gatling gun mounted on the end, same thing that was used on the back of, I think, their Bear propeller-driven bombers.
They fired it,
It's
too.
about a 33. Well, so they wanted to test it, and the crew said, no, let's do it after we leave. And so Control says, okay. So those guys packed up and left in their Soyuz, and then they test fired it. And according to the calculations, those slugs that they fired from that thing, and I think it was about 30 rounds, have probably re-entered by now. But what a great way to add more pollution to the low orbital environment, right?
That's right. It's like think if you watch all the sci-fi from The Expanse when they're shooting the point defense systems, all that stuff is still out there in deep space, just like hurtling out there.
Still speeding along, right. And this did work, although apparently it rattled the station pretty badly. But, it was mounted monolithically. So basically you had to reorient the whole station to aim the gun.
Yep.
So unless something large was coming at you very slowly, it just didn't make any sense. But, somebody's got to try crazy things. So in lack of Elon, we have the Russians.
Space Force turned 5 last year. We didn't talk about that. That'd be good to talk about.
Okay. So it's on here. It's the last story. So why don't you, since you just aggressively moved at the top, go for it. Space Force. And there was some question. There was a story I saw recently. I don't think it was one of yours. Sorry. That was basically saying, hey, the public wants to know what Space Force has been up to. And I think that's interesting. What I think is more interesting is how much money are they getting? Because there's the budget we see and then the budget we don't. But there's a lot to be said about Space Force. So
yeah, in fact, the Space Force and Patrick the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in particular sent out an announcement at the end of the year to say basically that they have been more active than ever before. They had more launches from Florida, from the Space Coast that the Space Force oversaw, and so they're expecting like a much busier 2025.
Excuse me, but same with Vandenberg.
The same event, yeah,
you are hugely busy. Yeah. We see a couple launches a week frequently,
and most of them are SpaceX too. Yeah, yes. So but I think there's two kind of open questions. Number one is, as we have said, there is a new administration coming in. Trump has actually mentioned the Space Force a few times. Remember, Trump was the one that started the Space Force in his first term as 45th president, and he has said that space security is going to be a bit of a focus, that he wants to ensure that all of the assets and whatnot that we have in space are protected. So you could see more investment come through that goal, that discussion as well, and then also just the fact that we have so much more infrastructure, even in the last 4 years, 6 years or so, since Trump started the 5 years, right? Since he started the Space Force, you could see much more development in that sector too. One thing that will be very interesting, though, is to find out how Space Command will be settled out. There's a lot of discussion right now about, is Space Command staying in Colorado? Are they moving to Alabama? That's been heating up since the Trump administration was elected, or since Trump was elected back in November. I'm not sure if that's going to pan out, if they are going to say that they're going to move Space Command out of Colorado to Alabama to try to do things. But similarly, as we expect some sort of reorganization at NASA, because of this efficiency push that Elon Musk is going to be bringing to the administration with Vivek Ramaswamy, I would expect some sort of fine-tuning on that score as well, right? Where they're going to say, hey, stop talking about this, we got a mission to do, or they're going to say, yes, we're going to do it, and this is why it's more efficient. But we'll have to see how that pans out.
Yeah, and what you're kind of driving at on the NASA side is the possible consolidation of a couple of field centers and the possible closure of the remaining field centers left behind. The ones I've seen on that possible list were Ames. What was the other one? Not Goddard. Lewis?
Marshall?
No, I think it was Ames and Lewis. Marshall would be part of the new Space Force operation, wouldn't it?
Well, they've got was it Goddard then you're talking about?
No, I don't think it was. I think it was Lewis and Ames.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I don't know much about Lewis. I've been to Ames. I've never been to Lewis. But anyway, I mean, you could expect NASA and parts of Congress to fight that tooth and nail. But, we got a lot of field centers, and these things were stood up in the 50s and 60s, and it may be that it's more efficient not to have that many. Let's take our last ad break and then come back with international, because we really owe some.
We should talk about that stuff, yeah. Credit
to the international sector. We will be right back.
We got 1 minute in the hour to do this, right? 1 minute. We'll get it all done.
Hush you. So just because it's got a cool name, Tell us about the European Space Agency's Space Rider.
Space Rider. Yeah, I love that. That's
Big
that's
Space Rider.
I want to be the Space Rider, right? So
You are a
this
Space Rider.
Hey-o.
Ba-ding.
No, but Space Rider is actually like a reusable space transportation system. I don't want to call it a space plane because it doesn't have like wings and a tail and all of that stuff. It's kind of like a lifting body. But this is really supposed to be kind of their next generation space vehicle that they'd be able to use for many different things like experiments, orbital experiments, that it would be autonomous, robotic, laboratory. It's about the size of, I think you have here two minivans, I think, and I've been told that the space shuttle had about as much internal space as like a minivan, a big minivan. So that would be some sizable,
You're talking about this pressurized space.
Pressurized space.
Yeah.
So
this is not a crude vehicle.
No, this is robotic.
Right.
And the idea is that they would launch it on, I think, a Vega rocket is what they have shown. And they would be able to load it up with experiments. They would stay up. It could loiter for a bit with its orbital module, and then it would re-enter, and they could collect everything back in space. And then that could be a foundation for using it for other types of things, not just being a free-floating platform in space or scaling it up in the future. It's been a long road for this. They did test some prototypes in the past, and they were fairly successful. But they have seen. It just seems like we were going to get this a few years ago, and it still didn't come back in. But it's got like payload doors. It can carry up payloads. It can deploy satellites. It can bring them back. It'll be very interesting to see how it comes back. It looks very similar to Dream Chaser, the Sierra Nevada Space Systems vehicle, except that it doesn't have that kind of twin tail that they've got on that thing, or the foldable wings. It's really much a lifting body.
It almost looks a little bit like a biconic thing. And it capability-wise, although it may be a little larger, it doesn't look completely dissimilar from the X-37B, which is still
the concept is very similar, yeah. And it's one that we've seen proven out too, right? The X-37B, built by Boeing for NASA and then given to the Space Force, has those wings. It's very much a mini space shuttle. China's Shenlong is a very much influenced copy of that. I'm not sure how much of it is homegrown or not. But this one is fully, like they've been developing it throughout, I don't know, the time that I've been here at space.com for a good long time. And it just seems like they're finally getting.
This thing comes back by parachute?
It has a parafoil, yeah.
Huh. As a lifting body, I assumed it would just land like all the other lifting bodies that have been tested. Okay.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. Rod is referring to our animation that is playing on the video.
On the video, which you should be watching if you're watching this show or listening to the show. All right, let's jump because we're getting cramped here. Make sure we get to China. They've got an asteroid sample return mission coming.
Tianwen 2. It's a very interesting mission because it's gonna launch to a near Earth asteroid, like one of the ones that kind of accompanies us in our orbit, collect some samples and send those back to Earth, and then it's going to go off to the belt, to the main belt, to look at some other asteroids too, which is a very ambitious mission. And if they're able to get all of that off, even the asteroid sample return up first for them, that would be a big one. And Tianwen is the family of planetary missions. So Tianwen 1 was the Mars lander rover orbiter that they sent, and so this is kind of their sequel to that. So that'll be really interesting to see if they can get all of the asteroid goals put together for that, because of the fact that they're not just going to visit one asteroid. They're going to visit one, land there for some time, collect the samples, return those, and then the primary vehicle, the target is called, I'm going to say this wrong, Kamo Alawaya, I think is the name of it. And once they get that back, then they're going to go out to the main belt to look at some other targets. I think it's a comet. They're going to go see Comet 311P Pan-STARRS. But they won't get there until the 2030s or so. So they've got two big ambitious check marks for this one.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting. And also incredibly unique, and I really want to make sure we get this one in because it's just so wild. Private companies have talked about planetary robotic missions before, but it appears that Rocket Lab will be the first to do it. Yeah. And I just have to say, I know a very small handful of billionaires. I don't know them well. I'm dying to ask them all, especially the ones that have many billions, why don't you just have your own space program and stop, put us out of our misery watching NASA cancel Viper and all that? You can afford to do it yourself. I would, but that's why I'm not rich, because I spend my money foolishly. So Rocket Lab's talking about a Venus Life Finder mission. That's very cool.
Yeah, this is a mission that Rocket Lab CEO and founder Peter Beck announced a few years back when they also announced that they had like their free flying kind of a vehicle, like a bus, to carry these types of things on. And Venus Life Finder is a mission that they're teaming up with MIT, I believe, too. But Peter Beck, I remember saying that he thought Venus was cool. That's why he wanted to go there. And I think so, too. But agree.
Not to stay, right?
No, well, you wouldn't want to live there, but it'd be a nice place to visit, right? And Venus Life Finder is one of those missions where it's fairly interesting, because it's a dedicated mission to go to Venus to look for, look through its atmosphere, its clouds for signs of ingredients that would be necessary for life. It will drop a probe into the Venus atmosphere to scan for organic molecules, which is an ingredient that we expect like life would need, and it would test a lot of other things. We haven't done that. We haven't gone into the
not a
atmosphere
lander,
of Venus.
just to be clear.
No, it's like it's going to drop like a probe into the atmosphere itself. Right. So I think they should bring back a sample, but that's just me,
But the surface is a really horrible place. It's so much worse than just dipping in the. I mean, there are parts of the atmosphere, as we've discussed in the past, with the whole idea of Venus settlements, quote unquote, meaning floating cities or floating compounds. There are parts of the atmosphere at certain altitudes that are actually very much like Earth, except for the fact the atmosphere is toxic. But in terms of atmospheric pressure, temperature, and all that, if you can float in the upper cloud layer, you can actually hang out there. Yep. That's pretty cool. The surface is Nastyville.
Yeah. Yeah, and Rocket Lab built this Photon vehicle to be kind of an all-purpose like tug, so they could put it could carry payloads out beyond your low Earth orbit. It could be used as a kick stage and whatnot. That's what would carry this payload to Venus itself, and it would be fairly light, 45 pounds. I mean, very small type of a thing, but right. And a $10 million at that, a steal, right, when it comes to interplanetary missions. Right. So, Da Vinci and Veritas were two NASA missions that are kind of on troubled waters, if not outright gone, that were each going to be like $500 million. And so we'll have to see about the success of this, but it could, I mean, we were talking about private space programs. If it's that affordable and they've got the backers for it, it might make it a lot easier for different types of this. They have a universal bus, launch it to the moon, launch it to Mars, that kind of a thing that you could see. We should do a story about how Elon Musk or an episode about how Elon Musk has turned into Dan Randolph from the Ben Bova books because of the fact that he's built his own reusable rocket program out of South Padre Island. I think that's a key point there. So.
But stepping back to your point about the affordability of this, if this works, and of course, you're using off-the-shelf components, so you're not paying $500,000 for a single outdated processor chip and all that, like you do if you're buying the flight-rated stuff. If that works, it could really change the way JPL does business too. Say, okay, just take the Russian approach, throw 5 of them at the planet instead of just one. And let's hope that it works. All right, this is your chance for the big wrap-up story.
I have one last one. I mean, like there's a few others that we had hoped to talk about. We'll
get to them.
Yeah, Europe's Juice mission is going to do some Venus flybys. The Lucy mission is going to keep going, and I think that what's the one we just launched to Europa? The Europa Clipper is going to do a Mars flyby later this year. Those are ones to watch. But there is a new mission from Japan, Destiny Plus, that I wanted to flag just because I think it's really, really cool. They are going to launch a spacecraft to asteroid 3200 Phaethon. Phaethon? Am I pronouncing that right? Phaethon. And the reason I think it's cool is because Phaethon is the source of the Geminid meteor shower, one of the most prolific meteor showers of every year. And it's a weird asteroid that kind of off gases. And we've talked about it in the past. Some people used to think it was a comet. Now they know it's an asteroid, yada, yada, yada. But this is their mission. And I just think that if there is ever a mission that has really stretched the use of an acronym, it is this one, right? Because space people like their acronyms, but man,
Oh, Lord.
so this is called Destiny Plus with a plus sign, and that stands for Demonstration and Experiment of Space Technology. So that's the DEST part. For interplanetary, that's the in. Voyage, the Y is the Y in the
It's
middle
just
of the
there.
word.
Yeah.
With faith on flyby, the L in flyby is capitalized for I don't know why, and dust. Oh, this is the plus. So Phaethon is the P, the L in flyby is the L, and dust, the U in dust is the U, and then science. So
These are what we call tortured
they
acronyms.
really went for it, But hey, and it's interesting because they're going to use ion engines to basically launch it into orbit, increase that orbit over time until it does a moon flyby, and then flings itself out into deep space to get to Phaethon, and that'll be really cool to see if they can make that work, and then what Phaethon's going to look like up close. I'm just, and they're going to use their Epsilon like solid rocket too, which is cool to launch it. I mean, it's just a lot of weird things about this mission that I really hope go well, because I don't know, like Phaethon is an interesting target. Destiny, they've really worked hard to make that acronym work. You want to see that succeed. So.
Just for the acronym makers. All right. Well, that was a good one. Thank you for that wrap up. And I want to thank everybody who's listening, watching, and hanging out for joining us today for episode 142, 2025 in Spaceflight. Mr. Malik, where can we find you polishing your high-fidelity Vulcan rocket model these days?
Well, you can see it right behind me. But no, you can find me at space.com as always, on the Twitter at Tariq J. Malik, on YouTube at Space Drawn Plays. A lot of good games. It's a new year, which means new games to play, Rod. So if anyone has recommendations, I got a few that I want to try this year.
I work for a living, so I wouldn't know.
Give me a shout. But most importantly, looking forward to, will New Glenn fly on January 6th? Will it fly next week at all? That is what I am waiting for. So.
Yeah, that's Monday, right?
Yeah, it's sometime next week. By the time you and I talk, it may have gotten off the ground. So
by the time you and I talk with Leonard David.
That's right. Coming up next. Ooh, spoilers.
That's right. All right. And you can find me at pilebooks.com or at astromagazine.com, or I was looking last night just to make sure nobody was impugning me the first 18 pages of my Google listings. Do remember to drop us a line if you feel like it at twis@twit.tv. That's TWIS at twit.tv. We welcome your comments, suggestions, and ideas, and one of us will write you back because we're nice people and we love our listeners. New episodes of this podcast published every Friday on your favorite podcatcher, so make sure to subscribe, tell your friends, and give us reviews or thumbs up or thumbs in the eye or whatever works. You can also head to the website at twit.tv/twis. And don't forget, we're counting on you to join Club Twit in 2025. Besides supporting Twit, you'll help keep us on the air. I think that's a good thing. I hope it's a good thing, and bringing you great guests and horror jokes, because we're good at both of those. You can also get all the great programming with video streams on the Twit network ad-free on Club Twit, as well as some extras that are only available there for just, can I hear it from Tarek? How much?
$7, $7.99?
$7. No, seven even. $7 a month. What else can you get for $7 a month that's as much fun as this? I ask you. I'm asking.
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Apparently a Stanford banner to put on your astronaut, which I just noticed after recording this whole session that's new for 2025.
No, it's been there for about 6 weeks, but that's okay. And it was a lot more than $7, by the way. But that's just how it is with college collectibles, as you know, because you went to one of the most expensive ones in the world.
I will show you my Letterman jacket from USC that I brought back from Stockton.
Don't you dare. Save it for next week. We appreciate it. It's $7 a month, well spent, and it keeps the processors warm and the electrons flowing to you. And you've heard Leo talk about how tough it's gotten with the advertising drought. So be our supporters and step up and be counted. Finally, you can follow the Twit Tech Podcast Network at Twit on Twitter/X and on Facebook and twit.tv on Instagram. Thank you, gang. It's been great, and we'll see you next week.